All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final Thanks Laravel live stream of the week. Sorry, yeah, I was just responding to some people on here as a quick tangent before we jump into today's. This is the thing I want to work on today is kind of related to what's here. So I think bringing up some of the stuff that people have left in the comments here, might be worth it. So let me just revisit this one. This actually got merged the other day, which was great, and it seemed like people like it. Got some thumbs up here, got a heart, and then overnight I got a couple points here that basically to summarize, like they're saying this is unintuitive to pass it an integer. Um, it's kind of misleading potentially. I think someone went on to say. I had a couple people kind of come in and say like this is non-obvious behavior. Um, that's unfortunate. I hate when that happens. You get something, you get merged, and you think it feels good. So like on a personal level, like I hate when that happens. Like you think you got a good little PR, it gets merged, thumbs up, and then you got a couple people coming in and being like this is not good. It's not a good feature. Um, I understand what they're saying. So I want to keep it at a high level. I understand what they're saying. In specifics to this particular bit, I will say two things. One, this is a completely new feature. It does not affect any existing code. You have to go in and explicitly use this new shorthand. Much like any other thing in the framework, if you're choosing to write code a certain way, you are taking on the responsibility that you understand, and you will educate your team, if there's other people working on it, about how you wrote that code, right? We can't just always keep the bar so low that everyone that ever looks at Laravel is going to just completely understand every line of code. Like, yeah, Laravel's awesome, and it's fluent and it's expressive, and it's very human readable, right? Like great care is taken into making it an approachable and a readable framework. But again, that doesn't mean that we lower the bar. There are definitely some big brain, complex things in Laravel that again, you have to kind of get used to use. So again, this is a shorthand. It doesn't conflict with any existing code. You don't have to write your code this way. These are perfectly equivalent with one another. So if you find using an integer HTTP status code as a shorthand for your testing layer fakes, don't use it. I find this valuable. I write a lot of tests. I appreciate that not everybody does write a lot of tests, but I think those that do are hopefully the ones that thumbed up this. So again, it's also at the testing layer. I would understand at the application layer this potentially being a bit misleading. Which brings us, I'm bringing this up because this is what I want to work on today. There's a feature I've always kind of wanted to see in the framework, and in a way it's good that I've gotten some of these counter arguments on here. While I hope that this one doesn't get reverted or anything, because I think there's value here. If you think there's value here, please go give it a thumbs up or whatnot. But I think, again, these points have some bearing on the feature I want to work on today. So let's jump into that. Hey, Mattias, how's it going? All right, let's get into the code. Okay, so what I've done is I've made a Laravel new project. So let me just get everybody up to speed here. I've made a Laravel new project, and I've created an invocable API controller and added the web route, and then I updated this example test that came out of the box to just hit this particular endpoint. We're going to look at all this code here in a second, but just to run this, we should see that it passes. Just expects a 200. So let me talk about the feature that I kind of want to add or propose to add to the framework. So I've always thought it would be super cool, again, from a controller level, to have more shorthands. There's all sorts of things you can return from a controller, redirects, views, inertia responses, flat arrays, collections. I think you can even return a straight eloquent model, and Laravel will figure out what to do with it. But I always thought it would be cool as well to potentially return just an integer for a status code, a 401. And I remember talking to Taylor about this a long time ago, probably way back like Laravel 5.8 or something. And he was saying at the time, like, yeah, that would be cool, but I think something where like some of the routing that happens, again, is kind of passed off to some of the sub-dependencies that Laravel has. And so kind of pulling that out and checking that it's an integer and checking that it's a status code and doing, you know, something different with it. There was some complication about doing that at that layer. And then to the point of the comments on this PR, the kind of counter comments that I mentioned here, two things. One, this might not be, again, this might be a bit of a foot gun for developers, right? If you return an integer, a typed, you know, number here, it's going to be a status code response instead of just returning a string of 401, just casting this as a string and it being a response. And then furthermore, unlike, again, the change for the testing layer that I made, this would affect and conflict with new apps. Right now, if you return 401, I'll go back, we'll run this test, it still passes. But if we went and added an assertion against the body to be null, it would now be 401, the string 401. So let's just add that test so we can kind of, again, continue to talk about this. So let's just say assert content. I think we can say empty here. So if we run this, this would fail because 401 is not an empty string, right? So proof that Laravel currently would treat this so people could write this code in all the apps out there, all the Laravel apps out there in the world. So if you wanted to make this change, two things. One, I think you're going to get more people that come in and gripe that it's unintuitive, potentially, which again, I understand at this layer, at the application layer. I do not understand that at a testing shorthand layer of new code. But at an application breaks existing code layer, that's kind of nasty, right? That's probably not a change. While it's cool, it's probably not a change that's worth it. So iterating on this, because I still like it, iterating on this, you know, you could argue, okay, well, what if you returned like some kind of enum, you know, of like status okay, right? And now it knows, now there's no confusion. It's a brand new thing. It knows that it's an enum of an HTTP class. You know, we could introduce this enum into the framework or something. That's an option. I've actually seen this in code out there, but again, it doesn't, it has to be wrapped. It doesn't just accept this response immediately. Furthermore, you don't really know that this returns an enum directly. This PHP could actually end up type juggling this depending on the backed enum value. So again, this may or may not work depending on where the type juggling happens. So the framework would still potentially need to be adjusted to kind of handle that. So the point is that kind of iterating on this, like what is something that's kind of safe, meaning it doesn't break current applications, but is still like worthwhile and Laravel expressive. And what I thought of, again, in Laravel would just be like, what if we just had like this status helper? I know there's a lot of helpers out there. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But what if we had this status helper and then the default is 200, but of course you could pass it like, you know, 503 or, you know, 401 or whatever. You could pass it then, of course, your, you know, whatever enums that are out there in the Symfony enums that are available. So you could just simply say like status, and then expanding on that, you could even go so far as to say like status okay. And this to me is kind of nice. And again, if this doesn't get merged, this could just be a package helper or whatever. And it doesn't break any code. It could be in Laravel 11 immediately. It doesn't have to be part of a major release. It doesn't have to be backwards incompatible. I think there's opportunity here. So again, let me know in the chat if you think a status code helper like this is nice. The inspiration for this is that readability. I think in Laravel 10 there was like a two route helper, and of course this is really just the equivalent of, you know, response, you know, route, right? It's just a shorthand for that chain, much like this would just be a shorthand for response, no content, you know, 200, right? So there's all sorts of helpers that exist in Laravel that are really just aliases or shorthands for other longer, things that you could write. So I don't know. I think this is pretty cool. I think it reads, going back to kind of this return to route example, return status okay, right? Again, that human readable Laravel-esque touch. So again, let me know in the chat if you think this is kind of nice. I'm just going to hack on it because I think it's fun today. And then I'll open up a PR for it. So, but yeah, anyway, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but kind of to the point that I opened with, even though I think it would be super cool, again, to have, this 204 or 401 and that be a status code, I do agree in this regard at the application level, and because of the massive breaking change, that could be unintuitive for people that just want to return some kind of number in their response. Now, again, the conflicting range would really only be values from 100 to 600 effectively, or 599. But the point here is that I don't think the breaking change is worth it, and I'm not too sure if that enum approach would actually fly due to the type juggling within Laravel. So I think this is a very close second, if not kind of beats out that secondary response just from its expressiveness over top of like a return HTTP like status. Okay, like this feels a bit chunky, right? And again, you'd still have to do a major version change in Laravel, so we don't get to use this today. We got to wait till like March. So yeah, as much as an enum I think is kind of a simple approach, I think this status okay helper is kind of cool. So I want to build this. So for now, you could say status here like 401, but you could also use like this fluent expressive bit. So let's see if we can make these two work, right? I'm gonna get rid of this other stuff for comparison. Let's trim this down and basically see if we can kind of get these examples to work with a simple helper. So yeah, see, exactly. I don't know what Laravel does with an enum response. I don't have an enum in the application. I don't know where one is off the top of my head. And then it's the difference of a backed enum versus, an unbacked enum. Like, I don't know what Laravel does with that. That would take some research. So if it did magically handle it as precast it as an integer, then you're back in that same boat of just returning a raw integer. If it doesn't, if it actually holds the enum, now you got a better hook where you're not going to break so many applications. So that is an option. So again, I think for today the PR is this, because I think this is kind of fun to build, especially this fluent chain here. I've got some ideas, so I'm going to hack on this part. What it turns out to be finally is, up in the air. So let me touch up a helpers. Let's touch bootstrap helpers.php. We're just going to hack this up inside of a Laravel application because I think it's going to be easier through that test to kind of drive it out, because if this just ends up being a helper, then it just goes and gets dropped into the helpers folder with a test. So not a big deal. So let's say function status, and we'll take a code, I guess, and the code can be null. And we will, for now, can code be null? I think for now, let's say that code cannot be null. And we'll even go so far as to say it needs to be an integer. So let's say code cannot be null. And really all we're going to do is return response, no content code, right? Yeah. That's really all we're going to do right now. So yeah, okay. Thanks for checking that out. Yeah, see, that's what Taylor was talking about. So from the chat, it looks like Matthias just tried this, or is it Matthias or Matthias? It's probably Matthias. Sorry, I keep saying Matthias. My brother's name is Matt. Quick tangent. My brother's name is Matt, and we tease and call him, Mateo and Matt, Mathis, and all these names. So I'm reading it literally, but yeah, it's probably Mateus. I apologize. Anyway, yes, that's what Taylor was kind of saying to me back then, is that controller actions are pretty much handled at the Symfony layer, and as such, we don't have as much control. So another reason why just making a helper is going to give us this functionality today, right? So let's see if this works. Let me go back and adjust the test. So the test, let's say assert content is blank. We're going to get status code, and let's just, for now, we'll just kind of stick with this 401 example, right? So let's go back to our controller. We're going to say status 401. It exists now. I think we need to get into Composer and make sure that this Bootstrap file is loaded. So let's just say files and Bootstrap helpers. There we go. I probably have to dump auto load. Let's clear this out. Composer, dump auto load. All right, that's going to take a second. Cool. And if we run our test, we pass. Okay, so just for giggles, let's just change this to like a 403, and we should, yeah, expected 401 but got 403. Okay, cool. So this is working. Very simple helper, right? Super simple. And the beauty is you can pass that status helper whatever code you want. So this works. It's just a shorthand, super simple helper. It's just a shorthand for basically returning response no content, much like toRoute is a shorthand for response arrow route or redirect arrow route, right? It just reads a little cleaner. I want to take this a step farther. What I'd really like to see, and I think what would kind of make this again read nicely, just like in our testing layer, we have like assert okay, assert forbidden, assert redirect. I think having that layer of like, that level of like expressiveness is very much worth it inside of the framework. So I want to push this a bit farther. Let's comment this out now, and let's uncomment this one. Just bring it down here for a second. And now we're going to return status okay, or in this case, we'll return, let's go back to the 401. So what's 401? Unauthorized? Unauthorized. All right. I want to try to make this work off the same helper, right? I think this is where we get a little dense, and this might be why it doesn't end up in the framework. But let's see, again, if we can make this work. So I'm going to change this to an optional code. The default's going to be null, right? And now we're going to say if is int code, then we would return this. We really need two tests to make sure this isn't broken, but whatever, we can uncomment the code we have. And then the flip of this now, this is where I want to get a little bit spicy. And this is kind of just me trying something out here. I want to try to leverage the HTTP status codes that already exist on response. So I think if we get down into Symfony, yes, here we go. If we get down into Symfony, we should, I don't think this is used anywhere, so yeah, it doesn't like it. But Symfony has all of these status codes deep down in their stuff. And Laravel uses these elsewhere. So if we go look unauthorized, there it is, okay? What I want to try to do now is say, if you call this, dynamically check one of these public constants if that name exists here, because they're all named uniformly. They're a public constant, HTTP underscore, and then the name of the method that you called. Return that instead. So we build this up from code that exists, but maybe just a tour, maybe just a couple lines of some kind of dynamic PHP, craziness that happens here. Now, of course, because of the code here, we're calling this in kind of a fluent way, right? And Laravel has Laravel Fluent helper. I don't think this is going to do what we want it to do right now. But the point is, Laravel has some interesting little helpers inside of it where you can say things like, okay, take something, make it fluent, and now I can call it like other objects. And it kind of allows you to call things on it in kind of a higher order type way. So you can say fluent data get, and then this, and it gives you access to a bunch of different methods, much like you have on the array helper inside of Laravel. Now, again, I don't think that's going to work in this case because, again, it only gives you access to kind of predefined methods, not just random methods on, some public constants. So ours is a bit specific, but the point is if we can wrap this as an object and return that, then we could allow it to be called dynamically. So a lot of words. Let's see what this looks like in code here. So what I want to do actually is return new class. And then I think, what's an anonymous? I think we could wrap this up in an anonymous class. So PHP, I haven't written too many of these. Anonymous class. These are like the migrations inside of Laravel, right? So we can say new class. We don't need to extend anything. And then inside of it, we would use the dynamic call method to allow it to be called. So let's see if we can prove this out real quick. Let me just say new class. So it's really just new class. We don't need to do anything fancy there. So we just say new class, close this up, and then we say public function call. And I think call gets with whatever. And for now, I'm just going to DD the name. What we should get there is unauthorized. That's what we should see in our case. So let's throw a little semicolon there. And so if you call this with an integer, it's going to work the way it does before. If you call it with null, then you're going to get back a instance of our anonymous class, which has a magic method handler inside of it, which gets the name. Craziness. But let's see. Okay, we run this, unauthorized. Perfect. Exactly what we want. So again, because of the way PHP works, we have this dynamic call method. This call method gets called if no other methods exist. So I don't have to go define like 200 different methods on some class to match all of that other stuff. I can use the dynamic magic method call, and it will get called anytime another method doesn't exist, which nothing else does in our simple little anonymous class. So now we have access to the name that we want. We can start doing some string manipulation and just return what we wanted to return before, which is effectively this, right? So let's mess around with this for a second. Let's get the name of the constant in Symfony. So we can say constant is equal to, we don't want to change name. We'll use our own public or temporary variables for now. So let's just use our own little stuff for now. We'll say this is basically http _ dot str2 upper, sorry, the string helpers versus what's built into the PHP. Okay, so this should give us the name of the constant. Now we can say if defined, and we need that old class back. Where did that go? This guy. Boop. We need response. So now we have to say if is defined this / foundation : dot constant. And if it's defined, then for now, let's just DD what we just did. I think you could say constant. Yeah, this is a bit meta, but I think it will work. Sorry, not foundation. It's foundation response, right? Foundation response. There it is. Yeah, I think that's right. We got to wrap this back up. We kind of do the same thing we did, and we dump it here. Okay, so all this is effectively, let's make not PHP syntax errors. Okay, so we're saying take the name of the method you called, uppercase it, prefix it with HTTP underscore. That should give us the constant name, should, if you called it the correct thing. And then we say, if that's defined in this class, this might need to be fully qualified, I'm not sure. But if that constant name is defined, then dump out the constant's value. So in this case, we should see this dump as an integer of 401, if we're lucky. And there it did, 401, cool. Now there's some problems with this. There's a couple problems with this. This works. Let's get our test passing. So now from here, we can return response, the same thing we were doing before, no content, constant, oops, why aren't my, yes, connect, thank you. Did I miss some stuff in the chat? Nope, all good. Okay, where were we? Response, no content, constant. Do we have some issues here? No, I think everything is wrapped up. I was making sure we had the right number of closing parentheses there. So yeah, we would return this from call. Otherwise, we would basically kind of like throw new invalid, argument exception or something, and just say like whatever is not a, HTTP status code name or something like that. So yeah, let's just do that now. Unexpected status code name dot name. Cool. All right, and again, if this gets into the framework, there would be a test case for every single status code. But if we go back, there we go. We're back to passing. And if let's go here, or sorry, let's go to our test and say, oh no, we want a 403. Run this. 403 is not identical to 401. So we're back to where we were before. And then just for giggles, let's put this back to 401. Let's close that and uncomment this one instead. Oops. And make it 401. And run this, and we should be back to green. Okay, so let's comment this back. Let's run that again. We're back to green. Okay, so just proof that both of them work. You can say status 401, or you can say status unauthorized. Now, one final thing. I think we don't need that test anymore. I think that this might be a bit naive. And what I mean by that is if we get down into the response, if we jump down in here, yeah, here you go. Switching protocols, moved permanently, temporary redirect, method not allowed. Here's a good one. Method not, let's do method not allowed 405 real quick. So let me jump back in here. How would you write this, right? You would say method, if you were Laravel, you would say method not allowed, right? This just camel case, right, is the point. That's not gonna line up with what we have. So this is where we probably need to start using like Laravel string helpers. So let's just go back to our example test. We'll make this 405. We'll run this. And yeah, unexpected status code name method not allowed. Good, so our invalid argument is being thrown. That's good. But we can fix that. It's just again, we were a bit naive in how we collapsed this. What we probably need to do is str to upper of a snake case of the name that came in, right? So let's try that. So we'll say str upper str snake of the name. Let's import the string helper and let's see if that fixes us. There we go. So there we go. We handle compound names as well as the simple names. Here it is. What is that? Maybe 8 lines of code. New class. Now, this looks a bit dense, and I think beyond maybe some of the comments that I got that, oh, it's unintuitive. Beyond maybe some of those standard comments, I think the biggest thing you're going to get when someone looks at this code on the surface is that it is, it's not performant, okay? I think some people are going to end up saying that. Like, they're going to see new class. They're going to think, oh, that's pretty gross. So let's prove that out real quick. Let's just see how nasty this is. So let me go back to an example test, and we'll leave this alone for a second. And let's make another test that's basically, let's just benchmark some stuff. We could do this in Tinker, but let's just put it in a test so it's easier to run. So let's just say it has acceptable, why do my AirPods keep disconnecting? It has it passes, let's just say it passes benchmarks. Okay, so what I want to do is Laravel has a benchmark, and we can DD, I think. Yeah, iterations 1. Let's DD. The benchmarks array will be response chain, or let's just say integer versus anonymous class, right? So the integer version would basically be call, I think you have to wrap this in a closure, so we just say call status, doesn't matter what we call it with, let's just say 401 again to kind of keep playing on. And then let's do the other one for the anonymous class. Same thing, 401, but instead of the 401 here, we'll use the method unauthorized, right? All right, cool. So let's call unauthorized, and then let's run that 10,000 times, 1,000 times. Let's start with 1,000. Make sure our code works before everything explodes. Okay, so let's run this. I'm curious the benchmarks. That's going to be first. So there's two benchmarks, actually. There's benchmarks in time, and then there's going to be benchmarks from a memory perspective. That's probably going to be the bigger argument, is that anonymous class is more memory intensive. No, that can't be right. Okay, I'm on my iMac. I would not have expected that. Look at this. Continually, consistently, without a doubt, the anonymous class path is faster. I mean, sometimes it's twice as fast sometimes. That one was close, the 17 and 16. I mean, we're talking, both of these are so negligible, first of all, let me just say that. But I would not, look at that, that's almost half. That's almost twice as fast as calling the integer bit. They both call response underneath. That's kind of interesting. Is it the code check? Yeah, hold on. Let's make sure we're not jumping into guns here. I wonder if it's this check versus this. So let's just flip this on its head real quick. Let's say if it's not, and let's change this to is null. Let's see if this if block is somehow branching and making it slower. Let's just give it a fair shake, right? All right, let's reformat that. Okay, so now we'll flip it just to make sure that if branch that if branch could be making up the difference. But either way, they're still very, very close. No, the if branch matters not. Look at that. Oh, there you go. There was one that was actually slower. Those are roughly the same. The if branch matters, it looks like, but it doesn't make up the whole difference. That's pretty nuts. The comparison runs all the time, though. Yeah, exactly. You're right. I mean, the if statement runs in both passes. So you would almost think because you broke early that, yeah, and my guess is, and again, we should check the memory. I don't know if benchmark can do memory checks, so we'll have to kind of run that on our own, unfortunately. But speed-wise, you're not losing anything. Now, you might be losing some stuff from a memory perspective because you're creating an instance of that class. But here's my guess underneath, and I actually think I remember reading about this on Stitcher.io way back when anonymous classes were kind of born in early versions of PHP 8. But I think I remember that they're very well optimized because they basically, instead of having to parse the class, as they're parsed, they're put into memory is the point. Whereas when a class is parsed, it's got to be parsed, kept in the memory, and then instantiated. But because an anonymous class doesn't have let's just call it the internal connection that has to happen maybe for a dynamic class, it's kind of static in a way, and as such, it's optimized, right? It's a very, very rough guess there. I'm just speculating, but I clearly anonymous classes are optimized internally to PHP, clearly, because it's faster. And I don't think most people, again, I think a lot of people are going to look at this code and say, oh, you turn the whole class all the time. That's not very performant. Time-wise, it actually is performant. It's at least the same. If not better. We need to check from a memory perspective. How tough is that from a memory perspective? But I would have thought from an anonymous class using a magic method, I would have thought the combo of the two would have definitely made it slower. Maybe not crazy slower, but anyway, that's kind of nuts. I might be missing something, but that's my first usage of the benchmark command too, so that's kind of fun. Does benchmark have... Yeah, you'd have to run it, yeah. Yeah, that's fair. We could compare directly against no content. That's true. Let's do that. We could do that. So let's just say, existing. Let's call this existing, and let's just return response. You're right. This would be the test, right? What is the current versus the potential new paths, right? So let's just run this for fun. See, that's something about that's kind of like blowing my mind. Something about that is making me question these benchmarks. Because existing... okay, hold on. Order matters here. Yeah, there it is. There's the rub. Order matters. Order matters because you're booting up the framework. So whoever's first in this benchmark is going to lose. So here's the real comparison. The real comparison is you have to first warm the framework up, right? By using response. So let's just warm the framework up here with response. Now I don't think that should be a knock against the status bit, because within a Laravel application, you're likely going to have already booted up the response within the whole application. I'm in the testing layer, my whole app's not boot, no request has been made here, I'm not doing any HTTP requests. Like, the framework hasn't fully booted, in fairness. So let's just do a simple bit here to just say no content there. So we're just warming up the framework, right? So now let's check these. Okay, there we go. That's why integer was losing the battle early. So if we look at these, so now if we look at these in fairness, after the framework has been warmed or booted, let's call it, they're all the same. Anonymous class now is slower, as we would have expected, but it's only fractionally slower, 1/100th of a millisecond slower. So I want to check the memory bit here, but I'm glad we found that, because yeah, once we kind of, okay, here, this one's a little bit longer. So anyway, yeah, again, most of the time these are the same. If not, it's a couple hundredths of a millisecond, slower. Yeah, existing versus integer being the same kind of make total sense, because they're both calling the same thing, and one's no longer within the if statement. So yeah, again, fractionally slower. So I want to check the memory usage, but there you have it. There's the status helper. Here's the code. I'll probably go back to the other one because it looks less dense. But yeah, I think the if statement was not the factor. It was more about the fact that the framework was booting up, right? So I like this little status helper. I think it's cool. I'll probably PR it. I kind of expect more devs to come out of the woodwork, as they unfortunately did with this one after the fact. This was still merged, so hopefully it doesn't get reverted for any reason. But yeah, hopefully this flies. But yeah, I think this is cool. I think this is kind of nice. I think it's nice and fluent. It feels Laravel. Again, it doesn't have a huge application per se, but to the point of the example, if you're using API controllers a lot and you're just simply returning status codes, this reads really nice. You know, return status method not allowed, right? Like, I don't know. I think that reads really well. But if it doesn't get merged, this is a super simple package that just throws a helper in there for you because everything else exists from the framework anyway. So it would have no dependencies. It would just add a global status helper and you get this. So I think even if this is not, even if this doesn't get merged into the framework, I think it's something that I would probably just throw in there. So yeah, and as far as auto completion, like that's just a doc block here. Like it's just a doc block. So I could easily commit this with a large doc block. So yeah, well, no, can you do a mix-in like that? That's tough. I'd have to look at some of the other helpers on what they return. I guess they probably return an object. And that could be a nod to turning this into an actual underlying class so you get the completion. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, yeah, pretty minimal stuff there. That's all fixable with either doc blocks or an underlying class. But from a single helper perspective of 15 lines like that, this is pretty fun. I think this is fun. So hopefully you all like it too. This is my final thanks to Laravel this week. I'm definitely going to be doing more PRs in the future. I think for Laravel 12, I have some ideas that actually would be a potential breaking change. So they'll be for Laravel 12. But as far as what can be used here and now, that was it. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining live, for hanging out this week. If you're US based or celebrate Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, and enjoy the weekend. So see you all next time.